Hey everyone, welcome to the College Lead YouTube channel. My name is Kristen and I'm here to help you perfect your college application process. On this channel, I cover everything from how to plan and strengthen your extracurricular activities to how to write your college application essay. Today, I'll be covering everything you need to know to get started on the college application process. It's a pretty complex series of events and things to know, so I've compiled 10 plus hours of different research and from my own experience into one nice video that you can reference and use as a starting point. So if you want to save yourself hours of research time, be sure to watch this video from the very beginning all the way to the very end. And if you would like to get one-on-one guidance from me on how you can strengthen your extracurricular activities, or would like to get guidance from me on how to write your college application essays and get feedback on that, feel free to reach out to me at mycollegelead.com. Okay, so very briefly, what I'll cover today. Can't type and talk at the same time. Please excuse me. Okay, so the first thing I'll cover is basically what the college application timeline looks like. I'll walk through when deadlines typically happen, as well as other dates to be aware of, and that'll kind of help you as a guidepost as you plan out what your college application preparation process looks like. The next point I'll cover is where to submit your application. Some of you may have heard of the Common Application. If that doesn't ring a bell, no problem. And even if you have, there may be other things to be aware of. For instance, there's some schools who have only one application portal, or there's other schools that bunch together and have only 8 schools through a particular portal. So, a couple of tips just to be aware of there. Once we walk through that, I'll then talk about what specifically you have to submit. So there are many different pieces like test scores, your personal information, college essays, and all of that. Don't worry about it, I'll walk through what that looks like in that section. Next, and most importantly, we'll talk about strategy. So when should you get started on the college application process? Because it's a lot, and I know right now summer is approaching. Hopefully you're already in summer. So for those who want to take advantage of all your free time in the summer to just get a head start on the college application process, this will be for you. Or if you are busy with some summer work or other activities, we can walk through what that planning process looks like as well. And then next, I'll show you exactly how to get started, and any resources that I mentioned, I'll try to link below in the comments or in the description. So with that, let's get started. Let's start with the college application timeline. There are 2 different kinds of school types you should be aware of. Let's just call one type A, and let's call the other one type B. So type A will oftentimes have just one deadline, usually just regular decision only. Examples of these schools would be all of the University of California schools. So for example, UCLA, UC Berkeley, UC San Diego, UC Davis, all of the UCs, they will have a singular deadline that typically is, the latest deadline is November 30th or 31st, depending on the year. And that is when all the applications are due. You cannot submit applications earlier than when the application portal opens, and you cannot submit applications later. There is just a single college application deadline cycle. On the other hand, school type B will have typically 2 deadline types. They'll have early and regular, and I'll walk through what that looks like in just a second. So examples of these would be anything like the Ivies. You'll have Stanford as well, and Northwestern, even Georgetown. So many schools, I would say, most schools that you'll encounter will be in school type B, where there are 2 different types of deadlines. School type A is less common, I would say. And let me bump this up here again. As I mentioned with school type B, there are 2 different deadline types. The main difference between early and regular is purely the deadline and when you hear back from the school. So the deadline is when all your college application materials are due, and the decision notice is when you hear back from the college on whether you've been accepted, rejected, or deferred or waitlisted. So for the early cycle, the deadlines typically range from October to November. Usually you'll see something like October 31st or November 1st. And then you'll hear back on the decision from the college sometime around December or January. Again, this varies by school, so just a quick note, be sure to, varies by school, be sure to do your own research here. Because the last thing you want to happen is to accidentally miss a deadline, especially since you put in so much work throughout high school, just preparing everything relating to high school and also your college applications. Now, normally for regular cycles, the deadline is January to February. Again, some schools may have a December deadline or even a March deadline, but most of the time you'll see the deadlines fall between January and February. And when you hear back will typically be in the range of April to May. Now there is a quick bonus tip that I actually want to share with you. If you notice, these are the college application deadlines for the schools with both an early and regular cycle. They fit nicely with each other and they don't really overlap. But if you find yourself applying to both school type A and school type B, you'll find an overlap starting to occur. So for example, with UCs, the latest deadline, as I mentioned earlier, is actually November 31st. Applications are typically open around August, and then you can submit anytime between November 1st to 31st. Of course, they'll vary year from year, but it's been pretty consistent the last few years in this regard. Some early schools may have a deadline of November, and here you'll be looking at deadlines for UCs around November as well. So that's why if you find yourself applying to the University of California on top of the early cycle for a school type B, then you'll find yourself preparing many different applications at once. I just want to caution you against having the misconception that you may be pretty free just to focus on one college application in this early cycle, because it's very likely you'll be preparing for, how many UCs could you apply to? Probably up to 8. Don't quote me on that, I'll double check myself later. But you may find yourself applying to all 8 UCs as well as an early school around your first semester of high school, which is a lot. So just brace yourself and just be aware and think of, do you want to apply to the UCs? And if so, will this situation apply to you? And how do you want to plan for that situation so you don't find yourself scrambling last minute at the cost of the quality of your college application? So with that, let me just paste the rest of the bonus tip here. I just wanted to walk through it first before I showed you the details. The next thing to be aware of is that there are 2 types of early applications with one main difference. So one type is called early action and the other type is called early decision. The main difference is that early action is non-binding, and I'll describe what that means in just a second. An early decision is binding. So essentially what this means is if you are accepted to an early action school, you can still apply to other colleges and are not obligated to commit to this early action school. However, if you apply to and are accepted to an early decision school, you cannot apply to other colleges and must attend your early decision school. So that's why for most of the time, I typically recommend against applying to any school early decision, even if you are 100% sure you want to attend a particular college. Because things might change. Senior year, you're experiencing new things, your friends are also applying to all their colleges, you might hear about other colleges you haven't heard of before and might want to attend them, or maybe your major aspirations have changed. And so it's always good to just keep that optionality and not tie yourself to a school early on. Because again, if you are accepted to your early decision school, you cannot apply to other colleges, even if it's on the regular cycle at a later time. You have to immediately commit to your early decision school, and there's no way out of it unless you want to apply as a transfer applicant later on, but that's just a whole hassle that you will probably want to avoid unless absolutely necessary. The next thing to know, and again, this just keeps going layers deeper, so if this is all new to you, don't worry about it, and if you know about this already, it's a good review. So here we dived into the 2 different types of early applications, and there are actually 2 types of early action. Fun times, right? I wish the college application process was not this complicated, but it is how it is, so I'm here trying to save you some time. 2 types of early action. One is just regular early action. We'll just call that early action. The other type is called restrictive early action. So with early action, you can apply to multiple schools. And with restrictive early action, you can apply to just one early school, or one school early. So here is an example. Harvard has restrictive early action. That means if you want to apply to Harvard early, you can only apply to Harvard and not any other school in the early cycle, even though the decision is non-binding. It can still be the case where you apply to Harvard around November, you hear back in December that you got in, and then you can go on to apply to other schools in the regular application cycle. The only restriction is the only school you can apply early to has to be just that one school that has restrictive early action. On the other hand, if, let's say, this is again hypothetical, there's another school that offers early action, you can apply to as many schools early action as you would like, as long as they offer it and it is not restrictive. That gives you the advantage of choosing among many different colleges early on and potentially being done quite early, even by the end of this year, with all of your college applications. Something to note, however, is typically you'll find that many competitive schools like Harvard and Stanford and other Ivies have something called restrictive early action. So if you are a high-achieving student aiming for one of these top colleges, you'll probably find yourself applying to just one school because it is restrictive early action, or it will be early decision. At the same time, again, always be aware the UC deadline is around the same time as early for these schools, so you'll be applying to plenty of colleges. You'll have more work than you probably will want in fall semester of your senior year. Something that I forgot to mention earlier is early decision may sometimes also occur in the same deadline as the regular decision. An example of this is Pomona. So they have different cycles of early decision, like early decision 1, which is maybe due around October or November, and then early decision 2 or 3, which may be due around the regular college application deadline. But again, it's that piece of the binding aspect that makes it a decision, because when you get into a school like Pomona through the early decision process, you have to commit to that school and cannot apply or commit to other colleges. So it's quite interesting. Why would a school want you to apply early decision or have you apply restrictive early action? Why have these restrictions, right? If you think from your perspective, it doesn't make any sense. But if you think from the college's perspective, it does make sense. The answer is 2 words. It's called the yield rate. And knowing how this works will help you understand and see the college application process from the perspective of college admission officers and also from the colleges themselves. So the yield rate is essentially the number of students who commit to a particular college over the number of students who were given their acceptance letters. Colleges want their yield rate to be as high as possible for a couple of reasons, but let me first explain why the yield rate is such an important metric for colleges. Schools want to have a higher yield rate so that they can make their acceptance rates lower and thus more competitive. It also helps a school's reputation if they're more competitive. For instance, Stanford and Harvard's notorious acceptance rate of under 5% or 5%. Because being competitive and selective helps them in turn to attract stronger faculty, like their professors, and also generous donors. If you think about it this way, let's say Harvard can have 2,000 students in every single class. So class of 2025, they can have 2,000 students attend that particular college. So now if you think from the perspective of a college admission officer, maybe you want to accept around 3,000 or 4,000 just to make sure you can fill up your entire class. So the higher your yield rate is, or the greater the percentage of students you give an offer to and end up accepting is, the lower you can make your acceptance rate. So Harvard has a yield rate of around 80%, which is incredibly high. You usually don't see that for many other colleges, unless they have a reputation kind of like Harvard's. That is why Harvard can keep their acceptance rate very low, keep their reputation high, and continue to attract donors and also strong professors. It all helps the school's reputation, which feeds back to the institution itself. So this is just the unfortunate reality, and this is why schools want you to commit to them, or have no other choice of going to other colleges, or restrict the options that you have earlier on so that you may view their school favorably. So for instance, if you think, oh, I applied to Harvard and they actually gave me an early acceptance, you might consider that more over other colleges that you may not want to apply for. So these are all just sort of strategies that colleges will use in order to help increase their yield rate. Keep in mind that throughout your college application process, you want to optimize for what is right and most effective and productive for you. If you are someone who has been completely set on a particular school, go ahead and apply early decision, or try applying restrictive early action and then just apply to a couple of more in the regular decision cycle to evaluate what your options may be. Always think about what do you want, what are you looking for, and make sure you can optimize your strategy for whatever decision options you want available to you later on when you are finishing the college application process. Don't apply early decision unless you're absolutely sure, and always think about early action or restrictive early action as an option. Hey there, quick note, as I was editing my video, I realized it was getting a little too long, so I'm actually going to split this video into 2 parts. What you just watched was part 1, so stay tuned and subscribe if you haven't yet already for part 2, which I will post in a week or 2 weeks from now. Please give this video a like and also subscribe if you found this helpful. And remember that you can reach me at mycollegelead.com if you want to chat one-on-one and get my personalized help.